There's a moment in every person's life when they look in the mirror and don't recognize the person staring back. For James, that moment came at 3 in the morning, slumped on a bathroom floor with an empty bottle in his hand and tears streaming down his face. He'd lost everything: his job, his family, his dignity. But what he didn't know in that moment of absolute darkness was that he was about to discover something far more powerful than anything he'd ever lost. This is a story about falling so far that the only direction left is up, and what happens when you finally decide to climb. If you've ever felt like you're too broken to be fixed, too far gone to come back, this story will prove you wrong. James wasn't always lost. There was a time when he had dreams, ambitions, a life that looked good from the outside. But somewhere along the way, the weight of the world became too heavy. Maybe it was the pressure to succeed, the fear of failure, or the pain of past trauma he'd never dealt with. Whatever the cause, he found comfort in the one thing that promised to make it all go away, even if just for a few hours. Alcohol became his best friend, his escape, his prison. Days turned into months, months into years. He watched his wife pack her bags, heard his children's voices grow distant on phone calls that came less and less often. He lost the career he'd spent a decade building. Friends stopped calling. The man who once had everything was now invisible, shuffling through life like a ghost, barely existing. On that bathroom floor, with nothing left to lose and nowhere left to fall, James made a choice that would change everything. He whispered to himself through broken sobs, "I don't want to die like this." The next morning, with shaking hands and a pounding heart, James walked into a rehabilitation center. Those first days were the hardest of his life. Withdrawal was brutal. Every cell in his body screamed for the substance that had defined him for so long. But something had shifted inside him. That moment on the bathroom floor had cracked something open, a tiny seed of determination that refused to die. In group therapy, a counselor asked each person to think about what they were living for. James couldn't answer. He realized he'd been running from life for so long that he'd forgotten what living actually meant. But then someone in the group, a former athlete who'd also battled addiction, said something that stuck with him. "You don't need to have all the answers. You just need to take one step forward, then another, then another. That's all running is. That's all life is." After 90 days in rehab, James was clean but terrified. The real world waited outside those doors, full of triggers and temptations. He needed something to focus on, something bigger than his cravings, bigger than his fear. That's when he remembered what the counselor had said about running. He hadn't run since high school, hadn't exercised in years. His body was weak, his lungs damaged from years of abuse. But the next morning, he laced up a pair of old sneakers and shuffled down his street. He made it 1 block before he had to stop, gasping for air, his legs burning. But he didn't give up. The next day, he made it 2 blocks, then 3, then a mile. Running became his meditation, his therapy, his proof that he could do hard things. Every step was a rebellion against the person he used to be. Every mile was a promise to the person he was becoming. 6 months into his sobriety, James signed up for his first 5-kilometer race. He crossed the finish line in tears, not because of his time, but because he'd finished. He'd set a goal and achieved it. For the first time in years, he felt proud of himself. That pride became addictive in the best possible way. He started training for a 10-kilometer race, then a half marathon, then a full marathon. People in his running group couldn't believe his transformation. They saw a dedicated athlete, but what they didn't see were the days he wanted to quit, the nights he cried himself to sleep, the constant battle with the demons that whispered he'd never be enough. But James kept running. He ran through rain and snow, through pain and exhaustion, through doubt and fear. He ran because stopping meant going back, and he'd promised himself he'd never go back. 2 years after that night on the bathroom floor, James stood at the starting line of his first ultra-marathon, a 50-mile race through mountains and desert. It was insane. It was impossible. But so was getting sober, and he'd done that. As he ran through the night with only a headlamp to guide him, pushing through pain that would have broken his old self, he realized something profound. This wasn't about running anymore. This was about proving that transformation is possible, that rock bottom can become a foundation, that the person you are doesn't have to be the person you become. When he crossed that finish line after 15 hours of running, his children were waiting for him. They'd been watching his journey from a distance, afraid to hope, but unable to look away. His daughter hugged him and whispered, "I'm proud of you, Dad." In that moment, James understood that he hadn't just won a race, he'd won his life back. So what can we learn from James's story? First, your lowest moment doesn't define you, your response to it does. Second, transformation doesn't happen overnight. It happens one small step at a time, repeated with relentless consistency. Third, sometimes the thing you're running from and the thing you're running toward are exactly the same yourself. Fourth, accountability and community are everything. James couldn't have done it alone, and neither can you. And finally, your past mistakes don't disqualify you from future greatness. They're often the very thing that qualifies you for it. Today, I want you to ask yourself, what's your ultra marathon? What's that impossible thing you've been too afraid to start? You don't need to have it all figured out. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to take that first step. Lace up your shoes, open that book, make that call, whatever it is, start today. Because your life is waiting on the other side of your fear. And remember this, you're not too broken, too lost, or too far gone. If James could rise from that bathroom floor to cross an ultra-marathon finish line, imagine what you can do. Your story isn't over. This is just the beginning.